Today is Tuesday, April 7th, 2026. It is 6:03 PM. This is Town Council Meeting 07-26. We are in Town Council Chambers at 30 Main Street in Freeport, Maine. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, our next order of business is roll call to see who is here. Councillor Sparta?
Here.
Councillor Pilch?
Here.
Councillor Brown?
Here.
Councillor Smith?
Present.
Councillor Benoit is here and present. Councillors Pillsbury and Lawrence will be here later on. Before we move on, I spoke with the manager today, and per conversation with the town attorney, in order to ensure compliance with state law regarding the potential citizen-initiated ordinance referendum that we discussed during our last meeting, state law requires that we have a specific language in calling a municipal election.
Yes.
Okay. Which we did not do, so I propose we add it to the agenda today. Do you have any other background on this?
Just that we cannot wait until the 22nd without having to call a special referendum election in mid-June, so we want to go ahead and do that tonight.
Do you need a motion to add that to the agenda?
So we need a motion to suspend the rules of procedure number 2 and allow for item 42-26 to be added as new business. If you would like to make the motion.
Sure. I move that we suspend our rules of procedure number 2 to allow for item 42-26 to appear on the agenda under new business, which is to adopt in order to submit a proposed ordinance by citizens initiative to a referendum on June 9th, 2026.
I second.
Any other questions on that? Go ahead.
Can I just say that the town attorney was comfortable doing this because the council clearly made it known that this was their intention when they made their initial vote.
All right. Do we have to reread it now that Councillor Lawrence is here?
Almost got
Okay.
you.
Well, you can if you want.
So just to get you up, Councillor Lawrence, we are adding an item to the agenda, essentially to discuss and it's an order to submit a proposed ordinance by citizen initiative to a referendum on June 9th, 2026. This pertains to the ordinance that was brought to our attention by around the Island Rover last meeting. So, and we have a motion and a second. So all those in favor? Aye. Would you like to vote or?
No, I'm just abstaining.
Okay. Yep, and then Councillor Lawrence will abstain. All right, moving on to our third item, which is to waive reading and accept the March 17th meeting minutes as printed.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Great. All right, moving on to our next item, which is announcements. I have a few. In partnership with Biddeford, geez, words are hard today. In partnership with Biddeford Saco Old Orchard Beach Transit, Greater Portland Metro is engaging in a fare policy review in winter/spring of 2026. This process is likely to result in a change to fares and fare policies for BSUB and Metro on or shortly after July 1st, 2026. The public is encouraged to participate in virtual meetings on Tuesday, April 14th from 6 to 7 p.m. And I hope we will post this somewhere.
Yes, with the Zoom ID and the.
Where can folks find it when they would like to join?
Chris is going to put that right on the front page of the website with Pete tomorrow morning.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
She's good at that.
All right, please join us this Thursday, April 9th at 6 p.m. at Freeport High School for the Village Corridor Initiative Community Workshop. This is an opportunity to review the latest design concepts for Freeport's downtown corridor. We will have a brief presentation with most of the evening focused on discussion and gathering community feedback. On Saturday, April 11th from 10 to 2, Freeport Community Library is hosting our second annual craft supply swap. We are still accepting donated items for the swap, and on Saturday, all are welcome to stop by and shop for free arts and craft supplies. Visit the library website for full details on what items we can accept for the swap. This swap is one of the many ways the library is promoting sustainability and is one small step towards becoming a certified sustainable library through the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. We have several vacancies on our boards and committees. We have one on Coastal Waters Commission, one on Cable Advisory Board. We have 2 student associate members, 2 member spots open for the Police Advisory Board, one for the Shellfish Conservation Commission. If folks are interested, they can contact the clerk's office or visit the town website for more information. Any other announcements? All right. Now we will move on to information exchange. This is an opportunity for counselors to share information about town-related interactions with constituents, residents, or updates from liaison activities from committee meetings. Counselor Brown.
First, kudos to the Civics 101 class that's being held. And last night was one of those classes. It was held in this place. It wasn't supposed to be, but kudos to Chris and the assistant town manager, Caroline Pelletier. We discussed a number of things, one of which was the value of that particular class in teaching people about town government, which sometimes leads to signing up on committees, which is wonderful. So, but the kudos are because the plans changed very rapidly, and they just did a great job making a new program for a new day. So that was great. Recently, I had a conversation with a citizen who expressed some interest in and concerns, actually, about short-term rentals in his neighborhood. He's been rather surprised at the number of comings and goings. And of the 3 that he knows are being used as short-term rentals, only one of them is actually registered with an official application. He also noted that one of the owners is an out-of-state owner who is never in the building, and expressed some interest in getting involved. And I said, yeah, that's a great idea. Your efforts in this will help us learn more about what, if any changes are needed. But I pointed out that, these days people find a little bit of extra cash to meet some of the rising costs by that sort of method. So it's complicated, but his hope is that landowners, people in neighborhoods, will have some say in this. I said, well, you're starting the process, so this is great. He did notice, though, that he feels like he's in a hotel zone and that it's a denigration to his neighborhood. So I said the town is tracking this for a lot of reasons, and we're even considering a software to help us keep track of such things. So to be continued.
Councilor Sparta.
First of all, was at the FEDC today, and I don't know if you guys follow the local business regs, but I'm very happy to announce that we have a theater that's opening in Freeport again, and we'll be seeing it open again soon. So thank you very much to Tani for all of her work over the past year. I know she's been showing it to a lot of folks and found somebody that believes Freeport is deserving of a theater and is going to be opening this spring, and I'm really excited about it. I hope you guys will turn out and support that when it opens. And I just wanted to say, staff does an amazing job. I think a great example of that is what we've done with alcohol licenses here in town, and Chris pointed out a great way for us to improve our process, and the process is improved. And I think when developers come here to town, they go through a process, and our intent is to have that waterfall down through the different boards in as timely a fashion as possible. And we had that opportunity, and I personally feel that we're falling a little bit short. And I would like it if the town could take a look at the structure of our calendar, so that when people move from one board to another, town staff has time to process all of the decisions that we make and make it actually make sense on paper. I think our staff works incredibly hard and does a great job, and our process could better support that. So I'd like to see us take a look at our process for running through those boards and look at our calendar so that it better fits, so that we don't run into those waiting times that we used to face with alcohol licenses. Specifically, this is a business opportunity down on Route 1, and there are some ordinance changes that need to be made that I'm certain will be made, and things will open on time, and the business owner will be successful. I think we need to align ourselves better so that in the future, businesses maybe don't have to wait as long as we currently require them to. So that's something that, as a group, we all need to look at. But let's continue, moving Freeport further ahead.
Yeah, I think to add a little bit more color to that too, I think the intent is, right now, we are on timeline. The timeline is working out well for the current applicant, but there's certainly an opportunity that we talked about where we could line up sort of the schedules of our meetings to be a bit more timely. And I think that's what Councilor Sparta is talking about, of just revisiting that if there is a way. And I think that's a question for Sophie and staff of, can we move our planning board to align better with the decisions that are made at the planning board, get onto the next town council agenda instead of 2 town council agendas later. So for example, we need to call a public hearing for the changes that were proposed at the planning board meeting. They had that discussion, I believe, last Wednesday. So pretty quick turnaround, but if that meeting had been a bit earlier, it could have gotten onto the agenda for tonight to at least save the applicant and the process 2 weeks. Great. Any other thoughts on that? Cool. I also did want to share that I had a very special tour of Public Works a couple weeks ago with Earl. I highly recommend any counselor who has not done that to take the time and do it. I learned quite a bit, and it was very fascinating. So, lots of big trucks. Counselor Pilch.
A couple of things. On the development front, next Wednesday, I think I have the date right, is a project review board meeting, and they'll be taking up a new housing project on Elm Street that's been in the works for a while. It's 12 units being proposed down towards the end of Elm Street on the left. So I'd encourage anybody who has an interest to show up at that. That's next Wednesday. And also one of the projects that had been previously permitted is going to start construction soon. So we're going to lose a parking lot on Depot Street at the corner of Depot and Mill. But we're going to gain 51 units, I think it is, of apartments on that spot. So you'll see fencing go up, I think, towards the end of this month is what I heard.
Groundbreaking is May 6th.
May 6th. And then one last note, Councilor Sparta and I were contacted by some of the sports boosters in town who had traditionally had a bottle drive at Bow Street Market where they would go twice a week to collect the bottles that were dropped off, and they would get to keep the proceeds. Because of some changes at Bow Street Market, they no longer have that space available for bottle drives, so they were reaching out to the town to see if there was a town space that they could use, and I would suggest maybe other nonprofits as well, to be able to do something similar where they have a contract that requires certain things of them, and in return, they get to use the space to collect bottles and get some sorely needed revenue for those kinds of groups. So if everybody's on board, I can follow up with town staff and come back with some proposed locations and rules.
Is that an ongoing space need?
I think so, yeah. There's 13 different sports boosters group. Those are the groups that reached out to us, but I know that there are others that have also used that space in the past, so I think there would be competition for who gets to use the space.
My understanding is that we used to have clink bags, does that sound right? Out at the transfer station, but there was a reason, something precipitated all of them going away. So let me dig into that.
I thought there was some history behind it.
Yeah, so let me just see what I can find out.
Okay.
If there is no town answer to that, I know that there are local businesses that would be willing to donate space behind their bar, where those groups could be undercover and within hailing distance of their fields. Be happy to make that happen, and they could clean out the bottles from the basement of said bar.
Spring is here, right?
It
Spring
worked out
cleaning.
well for the Harriers last year.
It's great. All right, any other bits of information we'd like to share? All right, then we will move on to information sharing Part B, which is for our invited committees and representatives. Today, we have the superintendent of RSU 5, Tom Gray. You are welcome to approach the podium and present away.
Good evening. Pleasure to be here. We also have some members of the RSU 5 Board of Directors. Karen Breer, Kara Kaikini, and Valerie Williams are here. And I don't know if any of you, oh, Anna, I didn't see you. And Anna Child. And I don't know if any of you will be leaving early to make the spectacular middle school sort of cabaret-style student performances tonight, and who could blame anybody for preferring that over a town council meeting of any town council. So if anybody needs to leave, no shade. My purpose in coming here tonight is to just talk about what's going on with RSU 5, which is a lot, and to take any questions that you may have and to try to make that as understandable as possible, given that there's a lot of complexity. So I don't have a slideshow, I just have a talk. And throw something at me if I miss something or get something wrong. So this is really about what precipitated the matter that I'm going to discuss is the budget for this year. But that morphed into much more conversation about where the RSU goes from this year. So when I signed on last summer as a superintendent, one of the first pieces of information I learned was that if I were to bring forward a status quo budget, it would be, at that time, it looked like almost 10% over the previous year. And then over the next few months, when we encountered some specific special ed situations that federal law requires us to pay for, individual student needs, kids who have really expensive needs, that ballooned to about 10.5%. So I kind of realized that I needed to seek direction from the board of directors about what they would like me to do with that. And I called for a special budget workshop in November, and at that budget workshop, I laid out the situation, and I also laid it into the context of our historical year-over-year budget increases. And if you were to look at that, it's actually laid out in my budget brochure. What you find going back about 10 years is an inverted bell curve, and that in the 2 previous years, the budget increases were somewhere in the neighborhood of 6.5% over the previous year. And then if you go back to the early 2020s, the COVID years, the budget increases were pretty minimal, which was common for school districts everywhere because of all the magic COVID money that was being handed out at the time. And then if you go back beyond that, you get the other half of the bell curve rising back up. So to jump from a 6.5% increase to a 10.5% increase is a big increase. And the perspective that I created was that if I were to bring that back to a roughly 6% increase again, it would have required reducing about $1.9-ish million from the RSU budget. And to put that in perspective, if a teaching position, a median level teaching position with salary and benefits costs about $105,000, that's like 17 teaching positions. So there were only difficult choices here. And to get to any significant level of reduction at that level, because staff is 80+% of the overall RSU budget, there's no way to get there without looking at staff. So hearing that, the board asked me to present them with budget options at a 6%, a 7%, and an 8% increase, which is what I did in February. All of those scenarios involved reductions in staffing, even the most generous tier. Because to get to the most generous tier, we still had to reduce $1 million, roughly. So we've been deliberating on that since the end of January. And we have brought forward, the board has adopted a budget that is in the middle tier with about 7.1% increase, which is what I had recommended. That does include reductions of about 15 staff positions, although we have, I would say, at least roughly half of those we have open positions for that will be available for people to go to. And that has been because, in the intervening time, people have resigned, people have retired, vacancies have come up. In the midst of all that, if I go back to the meeting in November when I acquainted the board with the overall budget picture, they asked me, in addition to presenting tiers at 6, 7, and 8%, to come up with some ideas for longer term, longer than one budget cycle. What could we do to put our district on sustainable footing? So hearing that direction, I went to the administrative team as we were working on the budget. And one of the facets of our conversation was, if we look beyond next year, what do we really need to do to make the district more sustainable? From those conversations, basically 3 ideas emerged, but they were not the only 3 ideas that could ever emerge. They were where we started. And I presented those to the board on February 11th. And those 3 scenarios were, number 1, we don't do anything. We just keep things as they are and we maintain the status quo. And by that I mean the configuration of our buildings and what we offer in them. Scenario number 2 is a fairly dramatic change. And I guess I actually need to back up a minute, because in the process of discussing that, what we really discussed were, what were the problems we need to solve? It is not just about saving money, actually. Money is one of the considerations, but other important considerations emerged. And among them were the state's mandate that by 2028, school districts have to take on responsibility for special education for 3- and 4-year-olds. That's a state law, and every district in Maine is going to have to do that by 2028. The state has coupled that law with some incentives for districts to take on that responsibility earlier, some extra money for like one-time startup costs like curriculum and assessment and equipment. And also, the earlier you take it on, the earlier you are able to hire the people that you would need to hire to meet the need, like speech-language pathologists, OTs, PTs, teachers, early childhood directors, et cetera. And anybody who's trying to hire in the public sector or any sector these days knows it's not easy. So that was a major consideration, because what we have realized when we discussed this through the fall, the early childhood issue, is that next year we can take on the 4-year-old responsibility fairly easily, but after that we have to take on 3-year-olds. To clarify, that does not mean we need to provide daycare to every 3-year-old and 4-year-old. What it means is we have to provide special education services to 3- and 4-year-olds who are identified to need them. So We already have pre-K for 4-year-olds, and we are actually already serving 75% of the 4-year-olds in our district who need special education services. So adding a little bit more of that is within our capacity for next year. What our real issue is 3-year-olds, and we don't have space for that. We're going to have to build that out at some point. And when that comes in the midst of a challenging budget situation, what we have to think about is how do we integrate 3-year-olds for whom we don't have space without necessarily adding new buildings or incurring huge costs. And another problem that really emerged was that in RSU 5, we have really incongruent middle school experiences for all of our kids. So if you're not familiar with how the district is configured, we have 3 towns. We've got Freeport, Durham, and Pownell. All Freeport's children, those who go to public school, they go to pre-K, from pre-K to grade 2 at Moore Street School, and then they go to Mass Landing School for grades 3, 4, and 5, and then they transition to Freeport Middle School for 6, 7, and 8, and then to the high school. For Pownell's kids, Pownell has a pre-K to 5 school, and then Pownell's 6, 7, and 8 kids come to Freeport Middle. But Durham is pre-K to 8. And then Durham's kids don't enter the mix of the entire district until they come to high school. And what we have really identified as a need is that the experience of kids in Durham and the kids from Pownell and Freeport who go to Freeport Middle School is incongruent. And that shows up in the programs that are offered, the opportunity to participate in sports and clubs, and on and on and on. I think one of the most notable programming differences is STEM, for example. At Freeport Middle School, they have STEM as a core class. At Durham, they do not get it as a core class. It's a special. So, and there are any number of other considerations like that, like world language, for example. So that seems like something we should try to address. So 3 big problems to try to address long-term: budget sustainability, how do we do early childhood, how could we do better by all the middle school kids? So now I come back to my scenarios of long-term configuration. Scenario 1 was just keep the status quo. Scenario 2 would be to repurpose the little school in Pownell as a district-wide early childhood center and co-locate all of the pre-K and preschool, that's 3-year-olds and 4-year-old programs out there, which would mean it would no longer be at Moore Street or at Durham. They both have pre-K right now. It would all be out at Pownell. I don't know if any of you have ever been out to the little school in Pownell. It's a delightful little school that basically abuts Bradbury Mountain State Park. In many ways, the number of kids that we would need to serve is a fairly close match to the number of kids that that building is created for. It would be a pretty elegant solution for early childhood. Then we'd have to do some reconfiguring. So what do we do with all of the kids who now go to Pownell? Well, in this scenario, the Pownell kids from K through 5 would go to Durham. No, I'm sorry, K through 6 would go to Durham. Durham's 7th and 8th, so Durham would become a K through 6 school. Durham's 7th and 8th grade would join all the other 7th and 8th grades at Freeport Middle. Freeport Middle would need to shed 6th grade in order to make that happen. But then here in Freeport, we can bump Freeport's 6th grade back to Mass Landing. And Mass Landing, which is right now 3, 4, and 5, would become 4, 5, and 6. And then grade 3 would bump from Mass Landing back to Moore Street, which would have lost pre-K out to Pownell. So that seemed like a kind of elegant way to reconfigure, co-locate some services, consolidate middle schools, and not building another building. Now, obviously, that idea has lots of pluses and minuses, and the pluses and minuses are very much tied to which town you live in the district. And it's fair to say that there's a lot of folks in Pownell right now who are not very sanguine about this idea, and I understand why. it checks a lot of other boxes that are worth considering. The third scenario, which was also discussed on our admin team, was to use Pownell in a similar way, but instead of for early childhood, to put a whole district-wide sixth grade program out there. So the early childhood programs would stay where they are in the towns, and then once kids got to sixth grade, no matter what town they lived in, they'd all go out to Pownell and have some kind of unique sixth grade experience. And then from there would go to Freeport Middle and Freeport High School. That scenario also has some pluses and minuses. It could be a really cool sixth grade experience. It could preserve early childhood in the towns, which seems advantageous. It's also probably difficult to make work when you think of bringing in special ed and art and music and world language and gym and all of the things that you have to do for, if you're doing for one grade level, you've got to do all of them to bring those in. So I don't know that that checks as many boxes. And since we have started talking about this, another idea that has emerged is that we could redistrict, which simply means right now, basically what decides which school you go to at the elementary grades are the town boundaries. It doesn't have to be that way. We could round out, we could send some kids who live in Freeport to Pownell. We could send some kids who live in Durham to Pownell, who live close to the town boundaries. One of the issues that we found in cutting positions for the budget this year is that when you have a larger school, it's easier to cut a position. When you're at Mass Landing and you have 5, this is hypothetical, if you have 5 fourth grade classrooms, cutting 1 fourth grade classroom means you can go to 4 and you can redistribute the kids, and you may still be very well within the class size policy, which is in fact what we've had to do at Mass Landing, at Moore Street, et cetera. When you're at Pownell and it's 1 class per grade, okay, you may only have 12 second graders and 14 first graders. You could combine the classrooms, but then you've got a multi-age classroom that has 26 kids in it. So the economies of scale just don't work as well in a tiny little school. And that's what we came up against with budget reductions. So we're trying to think of ways to solve all of these problems over the long term. And when I brought those ideas to the board, there was, my question actually was, do you want us to even go forward at all talking about any kind of large change? Because, as I'm sure you know, to actually envision a large-scale change requires an immense amount of work and an immense amount of money, because you have to really do your research, and you need to hire outside consultants to make sure you have good information, and it's not subjective, and it's not on the back of a napkin from my office. So, we're in the process of commissioning an RFQ for a study. What we're calling that study at this point is still evolving, because we want it to be inclusive of everything we need. When I first mentioned the idea, I called it a facility study. I've been doing research lately into how other districts that manage this kind of change are doing that. There's all kinds of studies out there, and the current thinking that I'm going to bring forward tomorrow night when I talk to the board is that the scope of this is really more like a systems and sustainability study, and it would include how do we optimize our staffing, what is the status of our facilities and what's their highest use, what are our systems that are in place and how could we refine them. And we're going to put that out there and see and take bids on it, and then hope we can conclude a study like that by sometime next December. Obviously, it takes a lot of time. And then have objective information to work from. And I think in a nutshell, that's about where we are right now. Did I miss anything?
I would just say that the board asked you to pursue option 2.
That's true. The board, while there was no vote, there was no action item, when I gave my first presentation, the board pretty strongly endorsed that they were excited about the scenario 2, which repurposed the Pownell School as an early childhood center. That would have implications for all the towns. So my reason for being here tonight is just to be transparent and make sure we have communication that is as effective as it can be and partnership that is effective as it can be, and to take your questions.
Thank you for being here, and also thank you to the board members who just have, or still in the middle of a budget season, really. I've been watching some of those meetings. Those are tough conversations. We're familiar with those up here as well. These issues sound very familiar to what we're going through up here of how do we think long-term of costs are going to rise, things are going to get more expensive, and how can we continue to provide high-quality services and address the tax burden on our community. So thank you for your hard work.
You're welcome.
The difference is Freeport's working Freeport. You're not.
I'm pulled in three directions.
You are.
And I think that as we discuss these, I don't just think, I know, that sense of town identity is going to be a very strong influence upon how these discussions go. Obviously, we have a lot of very concerned and understandably concerned people in Pownell right now who love the school, and many of whom moved there because of that school and don't like what's being proposed or considered for change. And I think that they have a really hard task right now to sit in a place of discomfort while we know a long decision-making process is going to unfold.
Any other questions for Tom? Councilor Bush?
Aside from the one-time startup money from the state, does the mandate to provide special education for 3- and 4-year-olds come with any long-term funding, or is that money that the towns are expected to invent?
That's a great question. So let me explain this to the best of my ability. The state law that requires school districts to take on this responsibility transitions it away from CDS, which presently does it and has been doing it for a long time, to school districts. We're the only state in the union where school districts don't have that responsibility. We're also the only state in the union, we are the state in the union that has the highest percentage of our children in special ed. I don't think that's an accident. And the benefit for kids is that all of the research has always been that the earlier you intervene with developmental needs, the better the outcome. And districts who have taken this on are in fact seeing when you intervene with a kid who's 3 who has a speech language delay, you can dismiss them from special ed much earlier. And in the long run, it saves money for the district, and it's just better for the kids and the families. So it is a good thing. We can do this better than CDS can. So I think there's a lot of support for the concept. The way the state is proposing to fund that is a separate stream of money that currently goes to CDS, which would be allocated to us, to school districts, based on a per pupil count. And we would be reimbursed quarterly for that. And it takes into account the number of students we have and then the needs of those particular students. And, anybody who has any level of familiarity with special ed, well, you'll remember at the beginning of this talk, I talked about special ed situations that came in and they cost money. There's a big difference between a child who needs some moderate or mild to moderate level of speech language therapy versus a child with profound developmental delays who may even need an out-of-district placement that could cost the district hundreds of thousands of dollars a year just for one person. So the state's reimbursement plan is count the kids and look at what the IEPs, what the needs of the kids are, and then they determine what is reasonable and necessary. And one of the discussions we've had is the state's definition of reasonable and necessary going to match what we think we actually need to meet those kids' needs? And this is always a conversation with public schools because the state has a funding formula of subsidy for public schools. And we, along with most districts, far exceed what the state gives us because we as a community deem it necessary to provide the kind of education we think our kids deserve. I don't know that I could with a straight face tell you that this mandate will be completely neutral to local taxpayers. The state says it will. And yet, when we worked out, we are joining what's called Cohort 3, which means we're taking on 4-year-olds next year. We're doing that because It's a light lift for us, and honestly, my biggest consideration is hiring. I'm watching all of the people who are qualified get hired. And I don't want us to be in a position where we can't meet that need. We've had to go back and forth with the state about what we needed for that lift. And in the end, they told us that our ask was, we ended up dipping into local taxpayers by $17,000. But out of that $17,000, we're getting a director of early childhood education, a special education teacher, a speech language pathologist, and 2 ed techs. So some of those positions were positions we already have that we're paying for in the local budget that we can shift to the state's special allocation. But the balance of it did come out to about $17,000 owing on our end. For all of that, it's a bargain.
That's funding we'll have to cover long-term. That's just the special allocation, you mean the one-time money?
I'm sorry, your question was about the special allocation is not for things like that. The special allocation is for curriculum. Some of it's for like gear to refit the classrooms. There's special money for transportation if you need to buy a van, which I think we will need to buy a van. It's stuff like that.
So one other question, the 10% increase for the status quo budget, I get that most of our costs are staff-related. I assume that doesn't mean all the staff would be getting a 10% raise. Can you talk about what drives that 10%? I assume part of it's benefits, wages,
Yeah, in
what
fact,
else?
I was looking into this morning. So the part of it that is due to staff wages and salaries is about 4.1%. And if we add benefits to that, it's about 6.2%. And the rest is mostly the special education costs. We looked at, before we looked at reducing staff positions, we looked at that less than 20% of the budget that's not staff-related. Most of the principals brought in their like supply budgets instead are at 0 or less. We deferred as much technology as we can. We deferred as many facilities things as we felt we could responsibly, like paint and carpet. We don't want to defer things like major maintenance that becomes more expensive later. Yeah.
I know it's the million-dollar question, no pun intended, but is there a long-term, I'm thinking about, this year to get to 7%, you have to cut some positions. It's a hard choice. So we know next year it'll probably be the same choice.
Well, part of why I think the board, this was so hard for the board. I think it was excruciating for the board
Yeah.
to make those reductions. But the strong hope is that, this topic actually came up last year. I wasn't here, but at the time, the board was really protective of the quality of education that we have, and they weren't convinced that we needed to make the reductions. And so the reductions last year were minimal. And then we've just gotten, the economy being what it is, the problem has magnified. And it just became really clear that unless we make those hard decisions now, we will have to keep making them again and again and again. And I think my best view at the moment is that by doing this now, we have minimized the chance that we'll have to do this at this scale in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else?
That was really thorough and.
Very helpful.
Yeah, thank
You're
you.
welcome.
And I will say, one of our goals from town council this year was to strengthen the relationship with RSU 5. So I'm glad you're here. If there's any other opportunity to have conversation, maybe without you at the podium and hear us here on the dais, it'd be nice to explore that as well.
Certainly invite any of you to come to our meetings. We have one tomorrow night. It's out in Durham. And where we are with the budget now is that our next 3 meetings are each preceded by a half an hour of just Q&A with board members about the budget. And the next one's in Durham, then April 29th is in Pownell, and then May 6th is back here in Freeport. And then May 13th is the annual budget meeting, at which members of the public can change the articles of the budget and vote them up or down. And I just strongly encourage participation in that process.
Great. Thank you.
What's the timing on the early education changes? Would that be for this coming school year, or would that be?
So we've taken it on for next school year. Technically, it starts July 1. I'm really pleased to report that on tomorrow night, I'm going to be bringing forward an early childhood director for the board, for them to confirm. So that's a huge thing to get it rolling. And we're ready.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
I just want to say thank you, Tom, for being here and for doing the hard work that you're doing, and also the members of the board who are doing your best to represent all of the students here in Freeport and the whole district to try to get the best outcome long-term. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our next item, which is the town manager's report. Sophie has attached that to our agenda. Anything that has been updated or changed since you published it?
No, I wouldn't, I don't think so.
Great. Any comments or questions on her report? Try and pull it up.
Might just be worth calling some attention to the golden ticket program, which I think is newer changes from what people are used to. Instead of 1 or 2 weekends in June, when you can bring your bulky items, you now have to keep that coupon that you get in the mail, but you can use it anytime throughout the year, so you don't have to come on that one weekend in June. So that should make it easier, I think.
I also wanted to call out the grant funding for the wharf project.
I will say that Charlie Tetro, Greg Mears, and Earl worked together to make that happen, and I'm quite impressed. $250,000 towards the $400,000 project.
And that's a project that's been in the works for quite some time and has sort of been moving in fits and starts. So it's advantageous, I would say.
Yes,
that
the delay
we didn't
actually
already
helped
do
us
it,
save some money.
even though we do know that the wharf is solid for this upcoming season.
Yep.
We're still planning on getting that done this fall.
We are. I do think that it is important to note that the $400,000, as we've gone along in time, when we put that out to bid, we're hoping it will hold. Our recommendation to you is to leave the $400,000 price tag in the capital budget, because otherwise, if at the end of the year we don't need it, it will be great and it will lapse back into the reserve fund.
It says we're in the final stages of a likely award. Can you let us know when it might be finalized?
Sure. So what we have is an email confirmation that it made it through all of the departmental hurdles and has been sent out to the financial folks. So as soon as we get the contract, we will let the council know.
And it sounds like we will have the department updates in our next.
Yes, I work at getting those from folks for the second meeting because it allows them to close out their monthly activities and do their reports and then get them to me.
All right, moving on. We are going to now open up public comment period for those who are in person. This is for items that are not on the agenda. Again, for in-person attendees only. If folks are interested in speaking, they may walk up to the podium. Just please introduce yourself and aim to keep your remarks at 3 minutes or less.
Hi, I'm Michael Delahunt, a resident here in Freeport, and I'd like to just make a statement and ask a question. The statement is that I am concerned that there's a number of citizens that see a purpose stated for the petition to launch the Island Rover. That's the purpose. And then the actual ask of people is for a zoning change that is in any 12 months. I just would like to point out that's contradictory language, And that makes it very concerning to me, that it just puts a big question mark as to why is that done that way? That's my statement, so the public knows the concern of the citizens I've spoken with. Number two is, I'd like to ask if there's any way to, with this petition, if it reaches the ballot box, that the town could have facts on there so that people know what they're voting for, which is a lot of any size, any tiny size, no restrictions, can be clear-cut 70% all along the shore. I just would like to ask, that's what it states, if you read through it, and I'd like it to just be able to draw on some facts. It's a long 6-page statement, and if there could be some quick bullets so people could know what they're voting on.
Yeah, thank you for speaking. I will say the manager and I and other counselors have talked about how we can support getting information out about the language in the referendum. We have to be very careful to be very neutral in how we speak of it.
I just
But-
want the facts that
Yeah.
have been presented, that this is the ask. I want people to know what's being asked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just?
Sure.
So I just want to clarify, because I don't think you're the only one who has made these comments to staff in the last week. Because of the process that they are using, the town is incredibly limited in how we can modify what goes on that petition. The town attorney has weighed in to some degree. But it's important to, we're going to be considering later that the actual ballot question will be an ordinance to launch the Island Rover vessel by A, allowing the construction of temporary boat launch facilities in the medium-density residential District 1 in Freeport as a permitted use. B, changing the permitting authority over temporary boat launch facilities from Coastal Waters Commission and the Project Review Board to the Code Enforcement Officer. C, exempting temporary boat launch facilities from certain lot coverage requirements and from the requirement that they be accessory to a permitted use or structure. And D, deeming temporary boat launch facilities constructed and used from October 15th to April 1 to be in compliance.
That was our 3-minute timer.
Yeah, to be in compliance with shoreline zoning standards, with the shoreline zoning standard that prohibits adverse impacts on spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, birds, or other wildlife habitat. So that's, the attorney took the crux of the entire ordinance and condensed it into one paragraph.
And so if you didn't memorize that,
I did. I've been reading it for 3 weeks. There's
we-
only 2 points that people care about.
Yeah.
Any lot can have 70% stripped off. That's all you have to know.
yeah. And I will say, I think this is, at least in digital form, what Sophie just recited for what will be actually on the ballot, is in the manager's report. So for the public who do want to read that, it's in the manager's report. I think there might be some printed copies if folks want a hard copy as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Would it be appropriate for us to host a forum, maybe even in conjunction with the petitioners? Just a place where people can come and ask questions, and we can offer, we don't have to be the ones answering, but we can sort of set up the forum.
I think you can do that. The decision to be neutral is a council decision. You can take a position on this if you so chose. So I think we could do any number of things. We could set up kind of a neutral, like just be a convener, or we could get more involved. The only thing we cannot do is use certain key staff members
Okay, yep,
in that.
makes sense.
And I know we had briefly talked about that at the last meeting, and if this does make it onto the ballot, I would be very interested in planning something like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Ken Murphy. I'm a resident of Lower Flying Point Road. I've been a property owner there for almost 50 years and a full-time resident for 19 years, and one of the objectors to the Island Rover launching proposal. Just to remind you, the petition, Carter Becker and his group have been asked to come up with 500 plus signatures to be validated to get this ordinance on the referendum. I went to the recycle center on Saturday, and what I found was someone who I didn't recognize petitioning all the people driving in to sign the petition. And what he told them, and I stood behind him listening to this, was that this was limited, this was for the launching of the Island Rover. The town has waited too long to launch the Island Rover. This was an opportunity. Please sign and we can get it on the referendum to do this. He never mentioned anything further about the other aspects of the launch, setting up launching sites elsewhere. There was none of that. I accused him of being deceitful by not mentioning that, and he just walked away. So what I'm telling you is that I think that no matter how many signatures they come up with, and he had probably 300, I would think from what I saw, that these people have not really been informed of what this petition's all about. Now, whether that invalidates it wasn't fraudulent. He didn't tell them something that wasn't true, but he misrepresented what the petition was all about, and people were signing without knowing what they were signing. So that needs to be kept in mind when you look at the signatures they come up with. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just to be clear, we can't kind of keep that in mind. It's either a certified signature, they're either a voter and they get certified or they're not. We hope that people pay attention to what they're signing either way.
And I will say, I think Ken is also just, as a public service announcement via public comment, letting people know to do research and educate themselves. So, thank you.
He did ask everyone he approached whether they were a voter. So he did comply in that sense. But that's one of the few honest things he did.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ken. So that one's not working to see your waves.
Yes, I think I'm about 2 minutes and 5 seconds or something like that. So, good evening. My name is Daniel Freund. I live at 38 Cheehawk Road. I just had a very brief and interesting conversation with the superintendent who's going to be getting in touch with me. I told him I thought $1 million could be saved for the schools, and he was interested in that idea. I very much appreciate the time the council has expended listening to my appeal to inquire of MMEHT about medical claims and related issues. I understand there was a vote during the goals meeting and the outcome was a consensus elected to defer the matter. I've been pursuing the matter for more than 3 years. During that time, Ed Bradley proposed to the council that software that I would make available to the town at no charge would be useful in offering a multitude of contemporary features, including online enrollment, et cetera. The council voted to accept this offer contingent on the trust being able to collaborate with the technology that we offer. When Ed inquired, he was told it was, quote, impossible. In fact, MMEHT was already doing a similar data exchange with another online company, one of our competitors. I point this out because it confirms that information presented by the trust is not always correct.
Most recently, the town manager was told claim information had to be limited to Freeport only, and I believe this is also incorrect. I have maintained it is best for Freeport and the hundreds of other communities to improve the trust instead of quitting the trust. I also maintain that this process will likely take years because I expect both trusts will be averse to almost all inquiries and hence contribute to substantial delay. Therefore, it behooves the council to reconsider how much work is going to ensue for the council when Daniel has volunteered to author all the correspondence, conduct all the research, and subject everything to your approval before meetings, before any communications ensue. In short, I do all the work, and FTC just does a review when the council decides it is needed. If appropriate, the changes made at MMEHT would set a compelling example for MEABT for RSU, resulting in an estimated $1 million of annual savings. Considering the inflation rate for medical insurance has overall been 120% in the past 20 years compared to a general inflation of 85 to 90%, the savings to Freeport and RSU 5 would be prodigious. I agree this should not be Freeport's fight alone, and I hope that other communities will follow Freeport's good example of making realistic inquiries. I've contacted my state senator and my state representative and the Maine Attorney General's office and other governmental organs, and everyone has rebuffed me with no specific reason other than they don't want to get involved. As a result, both trusts, I believe, have not had requisite oversight for a very, very, very long time. I would like to submit a brief strategy to the town manager for her review. Denial and delay are not the answer. Sometimes it's tough to lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. I do just want to clarify that there was no vote. We didn't vote. It was just a consensus conversation.
It was a consensus.
And then also that RSU 5 and the trust that we're under, they're two separate trusts.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
The MEABT and MEHT. I'm hopeful that if it can be shown that the same plans can be offered with the same providers at very substantial savings, that MEABT would look at this and go, well, why don't we do that? I mean, the gentleman was just up here saying that they're millions of dollars short. They're going to hire a consultant. I'm the easiest, best million you're going to find. Thank you.
And I just also, just for the record, thank you very much that, the council has devoted time to reviewing these concerns. The Finance Committee, individual councilors, as well as staff. And I want to say that Sophie did provide a pretty comprehensive email outlining decisions that were made on March 16th. And, what we have shared reflects consensus of the council, unless I'm told otherwise by my peers. So that's where we are. Thank you.
Things come up and people can reconsider at any time, I would suspect. Thank you.
Yeah, Andrew Arsenault, Route 1 Freeport. My concern is I want to bring up what Mr. Spada brought up earlier. The planning board last week passed a zone ordinance brought by an applicant for Route 1 South. We were at a meeting this morning, and I was told that it was up to Sophie to put it on the agenda. I thought it was chair and vice chair that set the agenda with Sophie.
We do it collaboratively, yes.
So when I asked you this morning why we couldn't have it on the agenda, you said it didn't work because you had to talk to Sophie. So that's what I remember hearing. Maybe I'm wrong, but my concern is that, if we wait another 2 weeks to set the public hearing, then we're 2 more weeks into another cycle to get it to a public hearing at the council, and then on to project review, and they set a public hearing, and then they have a public hearing. And that's a month or so out, or more. And I just think that as we sit here and say we have budget issues and we need more tax revenue, and the longer we wait and the longer the season goes by and the more this guy has to, time is money when you come to building things, and time is money when it comes to digging dirt, and the season is coming. And I brought up to you that you could have an item not on the printed agenda tonight, and I didn't get any quarter there, but I think that's a good idea that we should, as Ken said, move these things along a little quicker and you have other things marked up for a public hearing tonight, seems you could put an item not on the printed agenda with a vote from the council, yea or nay, and set a public hearing for this guy. And then he could be, a couple weeks ahead. So unless there's some reason we don't want him to come to Route 1 South, and we don't want to move him along, I think in this economy, in this, era, we had a bad reputation in Freeport for a long time. We're turning that around. We're getting the movie theater. We're getting stuff going downtown. We have other stuff going on. I think we just can't keep slipping back. That's my concern. Thank you for my.
Yeah, and I would like to clarify that. So the agenda is set by leadership in collaboration with Sophie Caroline on Monday. Planning board was on Wednesday.
I understand that. But
Yeah.
You could still mark up an item tonight.
So I would like to say that we're in agreement of we want to see things happen effectively and be considerate of our applicants here. Councilor Sparta and I had a conversation today about how we can think about process improvement, and I think that's where we're going to take this discussion.
When will this be marked up for public hearing?
So we will be on our agenda. The next town council meeting after the planning board, that was Wednesday, is the 21st. So that's when we'll
So
call.
this month it'll be marked up?
Correct.
For which month, for which date?
April 21st for the first meeting in May.
So that's when you'll mark it up for a public hearing. That's not when you're going to have the public hearing.
We'll have, we call the public hearing on April 21st. The public hearing will be the first meeting in May.
Okay, so that's a month out.
Yep.
That was my concern. If you'd marked it up for a public hearing tonight, you could have put it on the next town council agenda. Couldn't have the public hearing tonight, of course, but you could set the public hearing tonight. That's my concern. Thank you.
I heard, thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? Public comment? Moving on to new business, item 36-26. This is to consider action relative to adopting the consent agenda. We have some appointments and some donations to the library. Councilor Smith, can you please read the be it ordered?
Be it ordered that the April 7th, 2026 consent agenda be adopted.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Moving on to item 37-26. This is for the opportunity to give public comment on the capital investment program for FY27 to FY31. We have Jessica on Zoom.
Hello.
Hi, Jessica.
So this is just your standard public hearing for consideration of our upcoming capital plan. So it's just, if any members of the public have comments they'd like to make or ask, we go from there.
Great. So we will go ahead and open the public hearing if anyone would like to speak on the capital investment program. Is there anybody online?
I'm going to hazard a guess. I know. Oh.
Okay.
Nope.
All right.
There are people online, but nobody has their hand up.
All right, we will go ahead and close the public hearing. And pursuant to our charter, the adoption of the plan shall be formally considered at our next regular town council meeting on April 21st. Any thoughts on that? That's standard practice. Okay. Moving on to item 38-26. This is to consider action relative to setting a public hearing to discuss proposed amendments that were applicant-driven to Chapter 21, the Freeport zoning ordinance regarding RP1 and RP2 districts.
And at this point, I'm going to step down and recuse myself from any discussion that will ensue.
And that is because Councilor Brown is involved in this applicant-driven amendment. Thank you, Councilor.
Go
ahead, thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Kyle Drexler, Town Planner.
So we had an applicant-driven request that went to the planning board on March 4th for a zoning map amendment. So no text changes to the ordinance are involved, just a pure zoning change. So the area involved was 29 Pine Street, which is the lot you can see outlined here, and then a very small portion of 21 Pine Street, which is right next to it. So really the area that the applicant was proposing to have rezoned is, the whole lot in the yellow square, and then that little sliver, blue sliver on the abutting lot. The current zone is Resource Protection 1, and the application was to rezone to Resource Protection 2. So give kind of a brief overview that I talked about a little bit in the staff report, but just so we're all on the same page. So Resource Protection 1 is falls within our shoreland zoning ordinance. It's one of the designations within our shoreland zone. So just like the hashed area along the shoreline here, would be shoreland area. Resource Protection 1 is another one of those shoreland zone classifications. It's really meant to cover 4 distinct things. So it's areas that they're floodplains. It's areas with 2 or more contiguous acres of sustained steep slopes. Sustained areas of hydric soils and wetland vegetation, and then the last thing that can trigger an area being zoned as RP1 is areas for source water protection for drinking water supply. So the RP1 was the original resource protection district in Freeport. So it involved all of these things. In the 80s, the town developed Resource Protection 2 district, which just falls under the regular zoning ordinance. It's not part of the shoreland area. And the RP2 is specifically designed to protect groundwater quality and quantity. So the RP2 is very much designed as a type of aquifer protection district. If you look, the area behind the proposed lot for rezoning is South Freeport Water District. There's a wellhead back there. So that's where that RP1 designation came from. You can see there's some RP2 here adjacent to it. But so essentially, if an area is zoned as RP1, and the only reason that it's zoned as RP1 is that kind of 4th criteria that you're wanting to protect drinking water supply, there's a lot of overlap with the Resource Protection 2 district. The 2 intents there are pretty much the same thing. It's just that one predated, and the town kept this RP1 zoning even for these areas that only triggered RP1 to protect drinking water supply, even when we created the RP2. The difference between the 2 districts is that being within the shoreland zone, the RP1 is a little stricter because it involves these other environmentally sensitive areas. So for instance, single-family homes, which are in most zoning districts permitted outright, they just require a building permit, and you can build your house. As long as your lot meets the legal requirements. In RP1, single-family homes are actually a special exception that are reviewed by the Project Review Board. So you have some that predate zoning and are just, could be considered grandfathered in. They didn't have to go through that process. But in addition to that, there's a square footage limitation on single-family homes and garages, other accessory structures that might come along with the homes in the RP1 of 1,500 square feet. So that puts a pretty strict limit on the size of what people can do with their properties in the RP1. The RP2, on the other hand, does not have those restrictions. The RP2 aims to protect water quality in a slightly different way. So the RP2 standards are very similar to our regular rural residential 1 standards. It allows single-family homes. However, there's a maximum impervious allowance in the RP2 of 10% lot coverage, essentially. So, you're not going to be able to pave over your whole lot in the RP2 and create a bunch of stormwater runoff that's going to, pollute the groundwater. It also has a list of prohibited uses that, the RR1, for instance, doesn't have. So it has limitations on pesticide and de-icing chemicals and all this other stuff that could, seep into the ground and impact the water quality. So the applicant's proposal, as they're looking, I think, for some minor expansions potentially on their lot of some kind of accessory structures that one might find on any single-family home lot, they're looking to rezone their property here, and their neighbor, who has a sliver of RP1 lot, has also kind of consented to the idea of rezoning that sliver so that it kind of makes more logical sense to connect into the existing RP2 zone. Town staff has, I think, been talking about this for a while behind the scenes about there's probably a need to look at RP1 and RP2 on a more kind of global scale, and we could probably manage this town-wide in a better way, whether that's through like an aquifer overlay district or something like that. It's a little strange that the RP2 is a base underlying zone, because you see here, right, I mean, it could be possible that this whole neighborhood here is zoned as MDR2, with smaller lot size requirements, but then has, an aquifer overlay put over it with some restrictions that would help to protect groundwater. It doesn't necessarily have to be that an area where you protect water quality would only be in a rural zone. So there could be kind of bigger things to consider. So when this went to the planning board brought up the idea of, well, why don't we just look at rezoning this whole portion of RP1 to RP2 instead of just this, lot and a sliver of the lot next door. And that's the conversation that we had, is that there's probably should be more time dedicated to looking at a solution town-wide than just focusing on this kind of patch right here. And for the applicant, talking about time-sensitive things, the applicant has a proposal that they're looking to do right now that would help them kind of accomplish their goals on their lot. The applicant hasn't really looked into the other surrounding properties as much as their own property to verify that none of the other RP1 triggers apply on some of those other districts. Most likely they don't. Most likely this whole area is zoned as RP1 specifically because of that drinking water protection standard, but we don't know that for sure. So the planning board held a public hearing on March 4th. They voted unanimously to recommend that the zoning map amendment was consistent with the comprehensive plan and move to have it go forward through the town council process. The applicant's representative is here if there's any additional kind of technical questions. But other than that, happy to take any questions that council has.
So again, this will be just to set the public hearing, but if there are any questions, now's a great time.
I just have one small request. In the email from the neighbor, he writes, I have no plans to build on the land involved, but having the property in one zoning district just seems to make sense. If I'm reading the map right, the sliver helps avoid sort of this discontinuity, but I don't think his whole lot gets into one zoning district, so I thought it might be good just to clarify that with the
Yeah.
neighbor and send them an email saying this, you know, your property is still going to be in more than one district, in
Yeah,
more than one
it's-
zone.
It's still split, right? You
Yeah.
can see it here, like half of it would be R1 and half would be RP2.
Right,
Under the
right.
proposed.
I still think it makes sense, but I just want to clarify that for him.
Great. Counselor Pilch, can you please read the be it ordered?
I can. Be it ordered that a public hearing be set for April 21, 2026 at the Town Council meeting starting at 6 PM in Town Council Chambers at 30 Main Street to discuss proposed amendments to Chapter 21, Freeport zoning ordinance, to rezone a 10-acre parcel located at 29 Pine Street, tax map 23 lot 34, and a portion of 21 Pine Street, tax map 23 lot 38, from Resource Protection 1, RP1, to Resource Protection 2, RP2.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to item 39-26. This is to set another public hearing for amendments to the town ordinance, Chapter 32, shellfish conservation.
So I'm going to do my best to channel Charlie Tetro and Greg Mears tonight. This is what came back from the Department of Marine Resources after we adopt an ordinance or have a revision to an ordinance. It has to go to DMR. They sent it back with some changes. In Section 32501 definitions, it adds Ensis directus into the definition of shellfish clams. My research tells me that they're also known as razor clams and jackknife clams. It updates to use gender-neutral pronouns. It clarifies in Section 32601 licensing that recreational license holders cannot possess more than one peck of combined clams as opposed to before it just said a peck of clams. It changes the dates, and I can get into the specifics, but it essentially shifts the dates that the clerk can issue licenses, that they're going to be open from June 16th to September 14th for residents as opposed to July 1 through September 28th, and that they'll be open after June 14th, so on September 15th to be for anyone with no regard to residency. In the past, it was the 29th of September, so it's some shifting there. On new commercial licenses, if available, they would have to be issued by September 14th as opposed to June 30. And it changes the lottery from September 1st to September 14th. And if none were issued, it would change it from September 29th to September 14th. So they seem to be coalescing around September 14th and June to start. And then there was, on page 11, in the last paragraph, it says a really wrong word. It talks about, not that wrong. It talks about, it's not the last one, under M, change of residency. A holder of any residential commercial license who changes their permanent fixed place of abode and principal place of residence to it used to read ideation, now it will read location, outside the town of Freeport, ... So that is what we have, just basic cleanup, which is why Charlie thought he could trust me.
Fair enough. Any questions?
Why'd they change the dates?
Huh?
Why'd they change the dates?
Because it sounded good?
I think it's to be consistent statewide.
Does it present any issues for us?
No, Charlie didn't have any issues with any of the changes.
How did this come to be? Like, what was the deciding factor to make these changes?
So whenever we, so every time we make an amendment to the ordinance, and we had just amended the apprentice program, the whole ordinance has to go to DMR.
Cool.
And they have different people who probably find different things. This probably has gone up 4 or 5 times with all this same language
Yep.
in it.
That makes sense to me. Counselor Sparta?
As somebody that deals with DMR on a regular basis, you never deal with the same person twice. So it's whoever reviews it that time it comes up through. It gets assigned to a different person.
So it was triggered by a change that was then sent to DMR. Makes sense to me. Great.
It doesn't have any impact on revenue in one fiscal period versus another? So if they change it, I'm just looking at the section where it says the town clerk shall issue licenses to residents and non-residents following authorization by the commissioner of the marine resources as specified below from July 1 to June 16th. So there's a fee associated with it, right? And the collection of the fee would then be moved from one fiscal period to another. Are we okay with that?
So for 1 year, we might see a hiccup, but after that, it will be on a schedule.
Yeah.
And I think she's going to tell you we bring most of it in at a different time anyway. We usually bring it in April, right?
Right, so how the commercial renewal works is that they're required to pay at least 1/2 of their commercial fees by the end of April, and then the second half is required by the last business day in May. So that's still gonna stay, that bulk of that is gonna stay there. The change, there's a 90-day window for issuance, and we've gone back and forth with DMR about that date in the past, and we've always held firm to what our ordinance said, but like with this last review, they were really adamant that that 90-day window shift. And it's not gonna affect it. I think Sophie may have referenced the lottery for September, but that would be a second lottery if we had remaining license available. The initial lottery will still be done mid-June so that their effective date of July 1, they have their license.
I'm so glad you're here. Great. I'll go back to you, Steve, if you could read the be it ordered.
Be it ordered that a public hearing be set for April 21st, 2026 at the Town Council meeting, starting at 6 p.m. at Town Council Chambers, 30 Main Street, to discuss proposed text amendments to Town of Freeport Ordinance, Chapter 32, Shellfish Conservation, and amending dates as directed by DMR.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, that was 7. Now we will jump to the item that we added. Everyone should have a copy of that. Thank you, Chris. So this is item 42-26, to adopt an order to submit a proposed ordinance by citizens initiative to a referendum on June 9th, 2026. Sophie, did you want to cue it up for us?
So as I explained at the beginning of the meeting, when Amy went back and reviewed the order that we wrote about kicking this off and directing Chris to do the process, we have to actually go back to state law, call the election specifically on June 9th, subject to receipt of a sufficient number of valid signatures, and lay out what the ballot article would look like. And it has to be done 60 days before the election date, according to state law, even though it's a local initiative and it's not what our charter says.
So essentially, this is being proactive to ensure it lines up with the referendum that's already happening.
Yes.
So if the signatures are not collected,
Doesn't
it
matter.
doesn't matter.
Yes.
Any questions? Do our counselors have to read the full paragraph? Counselor Lawrence?
You want me to read?
I suggest that you
Be in
can
order,
say
yeah.
as written below.
Keep in mind, it's not published on the website.
Oh, yep. It's not on the website.
No, so yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, read the whole thing. Sorry, Chip.
You mean all the articles?
Yes,
Well,
sorry.
Article 2?
Yeah, exactly.
For the third time into the record this evening.
All right, Pete Horder. Come on. That the following ballot title and question be submitted to the voters at a referendum on June 9, 2026, subject to receipt of the sufficient number of valid signatures in accordance with Section 8.01 of the town charter, and that this order be filed with the town clerk during business hours on the next business day, April 8th, 2026, in accordance with 30-A MRSA, Section 25284, 5. Article 2, by Citizens Initiative. Ordinance to launch the Island Rover vessel by A, following construction of temporary boat launching facilities in the medium-density residential District 1, MDR-1, in Freeport as a permitted use. B, changing the permitted authority over temporary boating launching facilities from the Coastal Waters Commission and the Project Review Board to the code enforcement officers. C, exempting temporary boat launching facilities from certain lot coverage requirements and from the requirement that they be accessory to a permitted use or structure. And D, deeming temporary boat launching facilities constructed and used from October 15th through April 1st to be in compliance with the
Figured that out over here.
shoreland zoning standard that prohibits adverse impacts on spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, bird, or other wildlife habitat. Do I need to read the rest? Shall the above described ordinance be adopted? Yes or no?
Second. Thank you, Chip. All right, any final questions? Thank you to Amy Chow for flagging that for us. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, now we are on to public comment period, part 2, for folks who are not in person. Nope. And then we will move on now to other business. Item 1 is discussion of the Boston Cane policy from Councilor Vice Chair Eric Smith.
This came to Special Projects Committee. I'm sure all of you know what the Boston Post cane is, but for those following at home, it's not that one. The Boston Post cane is a New England tradition that was started in 1909 by the editor of the Boston Post, or the publisher of the Boston Post, wherein that newspaper gave out 700 24-karat gold-headed African ebony canes to towns across New England to be given by, most often the select board at that time, to the oldest citizen of that town or city. And in 1909, citizen meant male. By the rules that were given out, just 10 years after the 19th Amendment, they decided to include women who could receive the Boston Post cane as well. Many towns are still actively honoring that tradition. Most of them that do not have the original cane anymore. It's hard to keep track of 24 karat gold that you hand out to citizens and expect to come back. But there are often replicas that then stay in a secure location like the town hall or town offices. But the sort of ceremonial award to the oldest citizen still takes place. Freeport has not been following that tradition very well. We did receive a cane. It was awarded a few times. There have been previous attempts to restart that tradition. And this current proposal came to us from a citizen who is very interested in having Freeport restart that tradition. In addition to having a cane that would stay on display here at City Hall or Town Hall, and that the policy outlines the fact that you would have to be nominated. So it's not going to be the town clerk who tries to figure out who the oldest resident is, but you could be nominated if someone believes that you are the oldest resident, and that some committee, probably special projects, would review those when the post essentially became vacant, either because the oldest resident was deceased or if they were no longer a resident of Freeport. So there are other ways that post might be vacant. So this outlines how that would be decided, and the custody of the cane, what all of the eligibility is, and how that would be presented. There's also a proposal that even though we have not been awarding the cane all the way through, that because there are public records, we could list who we believe to be the oldest resident in Freeport for the years from 1909 or even earlier if we decided to, up through the present day when we would start to make that award again. So this came through special projects. We had a long discussion about it and made some edits to this proposal. But I think tonight we're looking to see what your thoughts are about this, and if you'd like this to come back as an action item for us to actually officially adopt a policy wherein we would make that award of Freeport's oldest citizen.
Did you talk about the replica in the plan?
So the citizen who is coming forward with this proposal has already acquired a replica cane and has built a custom plaque and case for it to be held here with room for individual names to be added, as well as pins that the oldest citizen would receive, and the pin they get to keep. And I think we probably have enough pins for the next next several decades, probably.
But there's no way for us to, according to the way you've drafted it, there's no way for us to actually verify that it's the oldest resident. It's just by nomination. So I could say, well, Ken's already got a cane, I nominate Ken, and if nobody beats that, then.
Yeah. Okay. We would write that. The suggestion is that when the post becomes vacant, that it would be announced in many of the ways that we announce it. We actually did talk about, we're not, doing a townwide mailing necessarily, but through primarily digital channels, it would be announced. There would be a call for nominations. But no, we're not going to demand birth certificates. We're going to go by the date that somebody puts on the nomination. We also are aware that one could be the oldest resident and not wish to be named the oldest resident, in which case, that is why, rather than it being simply a determination by the council, that there would need to be some actual submission of that name and that they would presumably agree to it.
Are you suggesting a minimum age?
No, well, the whole point is recognition of sort of the elder statesperson of our town. And if we're saying, well, we can't really verify that and we're not going to go to that process, it's then just an arbitrary somebody who wants a pin and a recognition, right? I'm not trying to make light of this or diminish it. I'm just, in my mind, the sort of, the reason it was all started in the first place was to recognize elders in the community. And if we can't do that, I just wonder where's the value? Like, what's that bringing to our community?
I mean, I think the goal is for us actually to find that person. I think the goal is to find the oldest resident. I think within limitations of modern privacy expectations, so that we are not again pouring through public data to pinpoint that, but rather having that be more of a public process to determine who that is.
So when we say the town staff would not be able to verify, we mean we would not be able to distinctly pull a public record and show it to you. But we have a general sense.
I think it goes along with the idea that we did stop publishing who the oldest resident was. We stopped publishing lists of deaths, for example, in the town report in 1986. And so when we, when you're able to go back through the town reports, annual reports, and determine based on how old someone was when they died that year, that's sort of how we can go back and look at this list. But that's just not something that we do anymore, and I don't think we want to start doing that. But I think to your point, it is about the recognition of the elder statesperson.
So do we put a minimum age on it? I mean, it's got to be above a certain level so that you don't have, I could be, well, you're the oldest one on this council. Used to be. Just kidding. Just playing, but.
Are there other, my go-to here is, are there other communities who are doing this that might have a best practice they can share?
I think that is some of what was pulled into this was the idea of given that the way that it was done originally is not entirely appropriate in the current context, that there is more of this public process, I believe, in towns that are still administering an award like this.
I imagine it'll get easier over time as it becomes more well-known that we do this every year. In the beginning, we might have to put a little extra effort in during year one to search a little harder or post it in a little more places. But I also think that the consequence of getting it wrong is not tragic. It's disappointing, but if somebody who's 102 gets it and we find later on that there's somebody who's 103, we can certainly issue apologies and make amends, but that's not the worst thing we will have done as a council.
And what do you do in the case someone older moves in?
They have to live here for 5 years in order to be eligible.
And that's sort of anticipated. And also the idea that if you are a long-term resident of Freeport and you happen to be outside of Freeport because you're in a care facility, that would not disqualify you. But if you do move away, then that would be one of the reasons that the post might become vacant.
We hope this isn't an annual thing.
Right.
Right.
right? We don't want it to be an annual thing.
And that's sort of
Nominate 20,
you know,
30-year-olds, that would be ideal.
one of the reasons that I think for many towns lost track of the original cane is because some people did have it for 10, 15 years, and the select board changed and nobody remembered that it was even a thing we did. So one of the reasons to have a policy is for us to be able to revisit that when all of a sudden, that office is open again. I do think, though, while the tradition really started with the cane, and the cane would be a focus of the plaque or the display here at Town Hall, I think if we were to go back and try to do a list of residents, oldest residents for the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, since we weren't giving the cane out through all of that time, we would want it to be clearly that we are trying to name the oldest resident in those years rather than saying that they got the cane.
So I'm curious, do you think people might be amenable to a slight change with changing values for aging and so forth? Maybe instead of handing out a cane, you might hand out a bicycle.
Well, I think that's part of moving to the pin, is that no matter what form of transportation you have, you can wear the pin.
And is it a family report when the cane is eligible again?
I think that, right, because as you say, I think it used to be acknowledged that the post was open when someone died, and you would know that from an obituary or death notice. However, the idea that, yes, somebody could move away and then therefore they're not the citizen again, I think once you have been given the award, and so your name's on the plaque, I think that is something where the town clerk would probably notice if your voter registration changed or there was another life event that meant that you were no longer considered a citizen of Freeport. That would.
I know we've joked about it, but is there a reason we wouldn't add a minimum age?
We could. I mean, my great grandmother got the North Yarmouth cane when she was only 92. So
I was not thinking close to that.
Okay. So you could say.
Yeah. The only other thing is, this is all well and good, and I think it's great how much extra work. It doesn't seem like a lot, but death by 1,000 cuts is not a good thing.
Yeah. We talked about, I believe it's in here, the idea that it would be a standardized period of time. So if say the post became open at the end of October, we don't need the clerk in the middle of election season to try to figure out what to do about that. But it would simply, we would start in January, and that would be an appropriate time to have that as sort of a new year opportunity. And I think a lot of where it would be some work for staff because of the noticing, and in terms of whatever the town channels are, they're going to be controlled by the staff. I think for the most part, it wouldn't be more work than, say, Citizen of the Year in terms of receiving those nominations and passing them off to special projects.
It seems like maybe there are some points for special projects to consider.
We can certainly go back and talk about, if we were to add a minimum age, is there a suggestion that?
I've heard 90 floated around.
90 works.
90 works.
Yep.
There are a lot of people living that long.
Are there any other changes that people wanted other than the minimum age?
I think the question.
Are we sure we want it to begin with?
The minimum age.
No,
Or the whole
policy.
thing.
I think we should consider that. As Chip said, it's another thing. Right.
I've been through the process of adopting Boston Post cane and resuscitating a tradition before. And, I think absolutely the council should decide what they want to do. I think when you talk about the nomination process, it's more about anybody who thinks that they or their loved one is the oldest submits. I will say it's pretty cool when you sit up here and you look out at a packed council chamber with relatives. There have been two that we've given that I had been part of giving, where one of them, they were in a nursing home and couldn't be there. But it really, it when you talk about bringing community together, it certainly does that. But totally up to you. Brief research shows 90 is the age I've seen. Shows anywhere from 5 to 25 years of living in town, and in general has it very clear that it's the elected officials that make the decision, that nomination can be part of it, their own research can be part of it. Their goal is to get to who they think is the oldest person in the community. But yeah, this is all up to you.
I do think that, to Sophie's point, that it is quite ceremonial. It is one more thing for the council to take on. When we think about, as the example of the other similar award that we do for Citizen of the Year, it really is acknowledging that Freeport, I think, is a lot more than most of the business that we sift through up here all of the time. It really is much more to do with people's day-to-day lives than just the policies that we work through. And I think it's an opportunity for the whole community to acknowledge someone who has been a part of that community for a very long time. And I think it falls to us essentially as the people who would simply confer that status, if it's something we choose to take on.
We did adjust some of the dates to make it easier for the clerk's schedule. It's a policy, not an ordinance, so it's easy to change, correct. If we need to correct a mistake that we made, it's just a simple vote for us to do it. And while I think we actually vote as a council, the presentation of the cane is by the chair or her designee. So if it's somebody that can't travel to a council meeting, or we don't have time because we're just swamped with stuff, we could make arrangements to send a person or some of us to some other location to give the cane, to minimize the impact on our schedule if that's an issue. And Caroline also shared an issue similar, an experience similar to what Sophie shared about how when they had given out the cane in an earlier time to someone, how moving it was for that person and for their family. To receive it and to be acknowledged in that way, and it like the amount of benefit they got from it seemed to exceed certainly the value of what they were getting, especially now in terms of a little pin. But anyway, it seems like there's a lot of upside, and like I mentioned before, the downside is I think minimal if we get it wrong.
It feels like it's a low lift to try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that it's another reason for us to connect with the community as individuals, and reach out.
Part of our goals, connect to the community. And, I think anything that brings joy, we should, that's very low/zero. It wouldn't be zero cost, but low cost, I think is worth considering.
I think it's a great idea. I just was concerned with how much, because we do this, and
Yeah, I
we
thought
keep
the
doing
same
it,
thing,
and we keep, and it's, there's no yang to the yin, I guess.
Is this it sounds like I'm hearing you'd like this to come back as an action item.
Yeah, I think so.
With a few tweaks, which really I think is primarily the age.
Yep.
I think that's helpful. I mean, it gives people a threshold.
Would the only action then be just to vote it up or down?
Because it's just a policy. Yeah, so not an ordinance.
Yep. Great, thank you for, that's fun. That's a fun one. Moving on to our next item is the workshop on our 5-year municipal capital investment program. We have a few more to go through. We have Brett and Chief Bob here. I think we're going to start with fire.
We still have Jessica, too.
We have Jessica. Thank you, Jessica.
Yep.
Absolutely. Sorry, it took me a minute to find my
Brett can come on down, too.
I know you saw Chief Goodman, we were at a table hanging out. Do we know which page fire is on?
We probably would if I remembered to number the pages.
All right.
But I can tell you it's right after police. It's the
Okay.
second article.
It's page 16 on the PDF. Thank you. I think that was Councilor Pilch. So just a reminder of the process that we did last time. Councilors can ask questions as they review the article. There's no need to wait to be called on. And I need to use the bathroom.
Sophie, is there a desire for me to just do a quick overview with fire? Or what, I mean, I referenced Sophie, but just in general, what are council's wishes for my information?
I think if you could warm us up with a brief overview, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. I would love to do that. I don't have, unfortunately, in my travels, I am missing the sheet that talks about last year's 2027 amounts. But for fire and rescue, they primarily remained the same. I know there was a slight reduction. Last year, we had the gear washer and dryer scheduled for replacement in FY27. However, we recognized some economies of scale and did it in FY26. So what you see before you this year for FY27 relates to the final installment of the hose replacement program that we started last year, as well as $15,000 to go towards vehicle equipment and replacement articles. So that's fire. I don't know if you want me to jump right into rescue or if you won't have questions for fire. The new stuff for FY31 relates primarily to the fleet, which is replacement of, if I remember correctly, at least the chief's vehicle or deputy chief, and then one other unit.
Just looking at fire, I see that hazardous remediation was this year, and that was foam disposal, and so that's all done at this point. And then the gear washer, I actually don't see that in 26. Was that in 25?
No, it was in 26. It was under the protected, well, hold on, sorry. That, oh my gosh. So what happened there is because it was done and there's no future appropriation for that,
It's just fallen off. Okay.
Yeah, I forgot to leave it on being a last year appropriation.
Okay.
So no new fire trucks or ambulances for the next 5 years?
Not in the next 5 years.
But then plenty more after that, I see.
$6 million.
Yeah. Oh, plus another 3 million for ambulances after year 5.
Yes.
What happens to the old hoses as you replace them?
We thought taking them to the transfer station, that, especially being a coastal community, maybe people would take the hose and
Yeah.
put it on their docks
Yeah.
as a bumper.
Yeah.
I don't really know. We have disposed of quite a bit of hose already with this past year's purchase, so, but yes, we've brought it up there. There's the metal couplings, you know, if somebody wanted to scrap that out, I suppose they could do that.
The standards require that we do hose inspection and testing every year. So we're pulling hose out based on how used it is, not necessarily on the year it was put in service. So because we are saying, ooh, we don't think this passes anymore or is very close to not passing anymore, we really can't like sell it to another municipality or even give it to another municipality.
No,
So
thinking more along what the chief was
yeah,
saying.
so we try to make it so it can't be used for those purposes and reuse.
Right.
If somebody does want it for their dock, would they go to the transfer station or contact you?
They could, or we could make it available at the station if
Either-
somebody
okay.
wanted to come and look and see what we have available. The LDH, the big hose that's on the back of the fire trucks that we hook to the hydrant, that hose takes a lot of abuse. I mean, it's drugged down the street as we're driving the fire truck and the hose is coming off. So, you know, for us to get 20-plus years of serviceable life out of that has been very good, so, yeah.
Helps that we don't have a lot of fires.
Yes, yep, inspection program is great.
Can save money that way.
I'm looking at the last item under Article 2, Fire, Vehicle Equipment and Replacement. Recently learned that you carry gas detectors that are very sensitive and can determine carbon monoxide, propane.
Yep.
And probably one other thing. I noticed this says, and so those are probably not cheap to replace.
They're not as bad as they used to be. They're much smaller, much simpler to, we have to actually have lanyards on them so we can clip them to our gear so we don't misplace them. But yes, they're four gas meters, so they read multiple gases. We will use those if we have a fire. We'll go in and we will meter people's homes to make sure that it's safe if it's possible for them to return. If we have carbon monoxide detectors, which we're having a lot of alarms right now for nuisance carbon monoxide detectors, and I think there's a little something going on with recalls and whatnot. So the thing is to call 911 so we can come and meter your home to make sure that you are safe.
The dual use are a problem.
Yes.
That's what I learned
Yes.
from your people, actually. I think there could be a typo in this article because it's talking about CO2, but I think it's CO.
CO, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, it was a relief to be able to call the department and have such quick response because a carbon monoxide device was going off.
Right.
And it was a mistake. I mean,
Yeah,
it was-
it's scary,
it was
especially
faulty.
if you have the one that talks to you and says, you know, get out of your house, carbon monoxide, carbon monoxide. Yeah, it's intimidating. Yeah, yeah.
Well, like so many things in the fire department and rescue and so forth, these things can be expensive, but in the moment, you don't have it.
Exactly,
Lives-
exactly. Yes, and we've had multiple conversations about quantities, and so the hard part we have is that obviously we want to have them on the apparatus that are going to go to those types of calls. We carry air packs on our ambulances because we're cross-trained to do fire and EMS. We could have an ambulance coming back from a hospital as we're having a fire. So those people have their gear on the truck, they have an air pack on the truck, and they also have meters as well that if we go to a CO call and somebody is sick, we're going to bring an ambulance with us as well if we have the staffing to do that. And so we have those meters where we can go in and meter homes and make sure that, you know, yes, in fact, there's a carbon monoxide problem or it's a faulty detector or whatever.
How do you, sort of a tangential question, but how do you determine if you get a call that says, you know, my alarm's going off, I don't think there's anything, I don't see anything on fire.
Right.
But can you come check it out? Do you have to send a fire truck with 4 guys, or can you just send somebody out with a meter and say, I think it's okay?
We can, if we get that sense, so dispatch, when you call 911 and you talk to Brunswick Communications or a PSAP dispatcher, they're going to ask questions, and they're going to ask, are you okay? Are you feeling okay? Do you have a headache? Do you feel tired? Are your pets sick? You know, those kinds of questions they're going to ask. And if all those answers are no, and, you know, and we'll pick up cues. Well, you know, the thing's been chirping for 3 days, but now it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I can't take it any longer. So that's when they call 911. So we'll go and handle it then. So yes, we can downgrade the call.
Okay.
Go with still the proper equipment. If we
Right,
go
yeah.
through the door and we're metering and the alarm starts screaming, then yes, we will put, you know, air packs on and all of that and determine what the cause is. Yep.
Great.
The thermal imagers is essentially the same. The thermal imagers have gotten a lot smaller. They're handheld devices and have incredible technology. They used to be, I know fire departments many, many years ago used to have bake sales and all that kind of stuff to spend, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars to buy a thermal imager. And so that technology has changed now as well. So, yeah.
Anything else for fire and rescue?
Oh, sorry. On the rescue side, the upgrade of the cardiac monitor. I know we did all of the replacements with the cardiac monitor, and then can you just clarify what this further expenditure is?
So that is covering, I believe we had that built into the budget, where we're replacing 3 of the units. And then when I came forward to the podium and asked to buy all 3 at the same time, this essentially is the placeholder for that 3rd unit that we did purchase.
I see. Okay. This is just where
And
it's
we've
coming
purchased them
back.
all. They're all in service now.
Okay.
It's just being carried as a liability.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so this was higher last year. We were able to reduce it down to what you see in the budget now, based on the economies of scale of purchasing all 3 at once.
Thank you.
I think you're off the hook. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
So moving on to Destination TIF, which is on page 62.
Ooh, we should, before that, we've got cable.
Oh, we
Just
got
so you-
Tom.
Yep. Sorry.
What page is that on, do we know?
58.
58.
Oh, I have the whole thing. It's one line, equipment.
I don't know, this is pretty robust. Supported by manufacturer.
So this is actually the same appropriation as last year. You'll see in the outgoing years, Tom and I and Sophie had discussions, and we've increased what we're appropriating, beginning with FY '28. But as we all know how I feel about year 1 of putting stuff in the budget, this is making that transition into a more sustainable level of funding for the amount and change of technology and equipment that's needed for cable programming.
And this particular reserve has a specified funding source, Jessica?
Yes, it does, the franchise fees.
Right.
Great.
Is this, all of the franchise fees go directly to this, or do the franchise fees pay for a bunch of things?
The franchise fees are split between the general fund and the capital reserves.
Got it.
We can cover the operating budget of the cable department, or up to essentially the operating budget of the cable department with the general fund.
I don't have any questions.
Is this equipment that wears out and needs to be replaced, or is it just there's a newer, better mic that we need to get, or
So we
camera?
have a stack of servers that deliver our signals out to the public, and we are in the 7th year of those, so I'm starting to replace them one at a time to run 24 hours a day. And they're expensive.
And that's most of 2027, is the servers?
Yep. I've already started. I've replaced 2, or I have a second one coming. Started a couple of years ago. And so they're our infrastructure for delivering to the public.
Any other questions for Tom?
Kudos for having a mic that you can actually touch now at the podium. It saves us a lot of time from explaining to people that they can't touch it.
Baby steps.
It's not quite so critical now.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, thank you,
You
Tom.
bet.
All right, now we will move on to the destination TIF, which is page 62.
I will say, before Tom goes away, that as I see other towns, whether they're having meetings or parades or announcements in the park, like, not to cast shade, but we hold our own pretty well. I think Tom does an admirable job, and everything is really, really high quality when we do it here in Freeport, and it's not always the case in every other town, so
Yeah.
thank you for all that, and to your crew as well.
It's my pleasure.
Any questions for the first TIF? We see the other half of the sidewalk plow in this one that had come up when we were with Earl.
So, it's not just the sidewalk plow, it's also, we're able, within the geographic TIF boundaries, we're able to do ADA accessible improvements, which we have several of those. We can also use it for some of our upgrades for sidewalks and things like that. So this does kind of end up being an important allocation of funds for Earl to keep the downtown spiffed up.
Is there any value in changing what we call it, if it's more than a plow?
So when you say it's sidewalk, the sidewalk equipment?
Sidewalk plow.
Sidewalk. So you're on sidewalk equipment.
I'm just on the.
Yeah, so what is actually if I am doing this correctly, Jessica's going to tell me if I'm wrong, the deciding factor is what's actually in the grid, Jessica?
That is correct.
So equipment, a plow is equipment.
Then the plow is what's being replaced.
With that's sidewalk
That is
equipment for
correct.
last year. You're talking about the 150,000 for sidewalk and accessibility repairs? Is that your question?
No.
Or are you talking about the sidewalk equipment for?
Sidewalk equipment.
Okay.
25 each.
The 125 and 2029.
Oh, later on, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Jump.
Can I ask you a question just about timing? So I get that the town economic development has moved from one TIF to another TIF because one's expiring, I think, and the other one isn't, but there's still some stuff being allocated to this TIF, so how does that work?
Yeah, sure, it's a great question. It's somewhat around flexibility. So the new TIF district, the Village Corridor TIF, which we just extended, we can use 25% of that for economic development. And so what we see here is the allocation for FEDC that we had talked about with the economic development plan, the 3-year, 27 through 29. So what we did is we kept FEDC in this TIF and then shifted town staff to the Village Corridor TIF, which has a new development program with resources that used to go to other CEAs and other requirements. We now have a new development program with more flexibility, so we're using that for town staff and also for the fit-up grants and entrepreneurship programming.
The next one is the Concord Gully Brook TIF.
Which I thought was going to get a whole lot more money as the years went on.
Yeah.
And I don't see a lot in there. Other than 50,000 for trail construction, which I assume is more just planning rather than construction.
So this one has a pretty interesting allocation of resources, and it's set up over 30 years, beginning in 2021. For the first 10 years or so, 95% of the Bean headquarters project is sheltered, and 77% of that goes to Bean to support the stormwater upgrades that they did to protect Concord Gully, and we get 23% of that. That's around $90,000 a year. And then in year 11, it actually goes down to 10% for the town. And then in year 21, the shelter rate drops to 50, and the town gets 100% of that. So if you remember those line graphs, right, the current TIF, the destination TIF is expiring, and the Concord Gully TIF sort of is flat for the town revenue until later, where the stormwater is paid off. So this is, we're actually kind of being conservative with this.
So what do we get
letting it accrue a little bit. Some of the development program requirements are a little less flexible than some of the other resources. Recreational trails are available, and some other great things, but we're sort of allowing this to accrue at this point because we have some more flexibility in this Village Corridor TIF.
Yeah.
That's the strategy.
How much do we get a year for the Concord Gully Brook for the first 10 years?
It's around $90,000 a year.
90, okay.
Yeah, and then that drops to around 40. This is all based on current values, and it changes a little bit over time, but from projections, it's about $90,000 a year, then 42 in the middle, and then once the liabilities are gone away, then our goes up to around 200, over 200 a year for the last 10 years.
Which TIF are we using for the trail construction? I'm asking only because when we did the original TIF, I know a lot of the incentive was we can build trails through the woods with this kind of money.
Yep.
So is that now coming out of a different TIF, or is it just not ready to be put on the capital plan yet? Are we still thinking of doing those?
It's a good question. We put in $50,000 this year for the matching funds for the Main State Trails Grant, but we really haven't gotten too firm on those commitments yet, just as things shake out. And we also have the Village Corridor TIF again, with a lot of opportunity to leverage state matching funds on that.
Right, for DOT, yeah.
I think one of the things that's on your capital plan, on your goals for this coming year, is to kind of figure out where these trails are really going to go, because we've got some competing thoughts, and so those are ultimately going to have to come to you. So we're just allocating money to.
Yeah, my question is it enough over the next several years? So at our town council goal meeting, we had a discussion. There was a bit of angst, I think, about the pace of trail construction, given how long we've been talking about it, and why can't we just do it? And there were a lot of good reasons why, so I get it, but there's also a lot of enthusiasm for getting some trails built. So I want to make sure we have enough money allocated for it in the plan.
So Jessica's probably not going to like this answer, but with tax increment financing dollars, it is a big reserve that we've got 150,000 that was in there at the beginning of this year, and nothing coming out over the next, out of FY26. So if we suddenly had a eureka moment and you guys said, this is absolutely what we want, we could go back in with a project and pull what we needed for it.
Yeah.
But right now, we're letting it build. Right now, we're just letting it build, so there's 50,000 and 40 is staying in the TIF. Right,
It's
in
just
theory.
150,000, yeah.
To Sophie's point, by the end of this year, we should have a pretty good plan for prioritization and how we want to really focus our energies on that, which will help inform the capital plan going forward.
So then for future years, it might be easier to plan out and say, now we have a plan, this is what it looks like.
We didn't want to just throw a dart because our fear was that then people would assume that we had a plan. But we really don't know what we want to do. So to take this next fiscal year, calendar year and figure that out, and then come back. Jessica is a lot less worried about year one out of the TIFs just because the program is really defined.
Yeah, yeah. I also have a fear that if we don't have a plan, then it looks like, I don't want to say this too loudly, but it looks like we have too much money, right?
Oh,
If
yeah.
it's 150,000 in the TIF, we're adding 90,000 every year, we don't have a plan on what we're going to do with it, that doesn't look good either. So if we have a plan to fix it by next year, I'm comfortable.
That's the plan. The plan is to get it done.
All right, Village Corridor TIF.
The town economic development went up by 50% from last year.
That includes fit-up grants, 50 grand a year for fit-up grants, and 10 grand a year for entrepreneurship programming.
It also includes allocating some other allowable salaries into the TIF, correct?
It does. So that's the economic development part that I mentioned.
Yeah.
But in terms of the admin and public infrastructure.
Oh, I see the other piece, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the real strengths of this, is that if we can focus our energy within this corridor, public works time, planning time, finance time, town manager time, that's relevant to these projects, we can track that and we can pull that from the TIF. So there's the assets and the infrastructure that we would invest in, but there's also the staff time that's eligible to manage that.
So that's $678,000 we don't have to pay for out of our operating budget.
Correct. I mean, I think we would want to focus that on infrastructure largely, but we're going to track the first year. We've made some projections for this year, but we can
Yeah.
track that. I think it's pretty light.
Yeah, we're thinking for next year, it's going to be between $70,000 and $75,000 total that we would have been paying out of the general fund that we can absolutely conservatively allocate to the TIF. This is something that I've done in my previous role, but also had Brett triple check with the Department of Community and Economic Development just to make sure I wasn't breaking the rules before.
So the other 600 grand is for stuff?
Stuff.
Do we know what that stuff is yet?
We're going to know, well,
Oh, this is after what Thursdays were?
What's that?
Is this what Thursdays were?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll come out of that effort with the real understanding of, what the corridor upgrades we want to see are. We'll have an opportunity to sort of prioritize those, and then we'll also have a chance to marry up certain projects with DOT funding. And so at that point, we can get very granular. That's one of the deliverables that we will bring to you all, is a draft of what that looks like.
We're kind of priming the pump with this money for now.
Yeah, so it's a little vague this year, but hopefully, by next year, this will become much more detailed, and we could probably go out even farther than 5 years hypothetically.
Okay, thanks.
I think we've made it to the end. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Brett.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So when we look at this, the only other place that you have not specifically talked about is boards and committees. We have not normally carried that in the capital. That has, boards and committees have operational budgets where you tend to throw things in, and Earl carries a little bit of money in his capital for the infrastructure pieces, like, you know, the bridge that needs to be redone and stuff like that.
All right. Well, with that, Counselor Sparta, do you want to bring us into an executive session?
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jessica.
Be it ordered that the town council enter into an executive session pursuant to, thank you, sir. Be it ordered that the town council enter into an executive session pursuant to 1 MRS 405-6A for discussion related to the town manager's employment contract renewal negotiations.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, we're in executive session. We're going to move into Sophie's office, so Tom's team can break down in here. Do you want